The strange drink. The cold wind howled through the empty streets as Ethan Carter walked slowly, his body weak, his breath shallow. His hands trembled as he pulled his coat tighter around him. He had once been strong, a soldier who fought battles. But now, his body was giving up. The doctors had told him there was no cure for his illness. Ethan had accepted his fate. He had only a few weeks left to live. But that night, as he sat on a wooden bench near an old, closed diner, something unexpected happened. A woman in a long silver coat approached him. Her movements were smooth, almost too perfect, and her eyes glowed softly under the streetlight. Ethan had seen many people in his life, but there was something strange about her. She sat down beside him without asking. Her presence felt calm yet powerful. Ethan turned his head slightly, observing her. "You look like a man who was waiting for the end," she said softly. Ethan chuckled dryly. "And who might you be?" "The angel of death." The woman smiled, but it was not a normal smile. It was almost knowing. "No," she said, "I am Dr. Vale, and I am here to offer you life." Ethan scoffed. "Life? Lady, I've seen more doctors than I can count. They all say the same thing. There's nothing that can be done." Dr. Vale reached into her coat and pulled out a small glass bottle filled with a glowing, milky white liquid. "Drink this," she said, her voice firm, "and you will be healed." Ethan stared at the bottle. The liquid inside glowed faintly, as if it were alive. He laughed. "Is this some kind of joke? You expect me to drink some glowing milk and magically be fine?" Dr. Vale's expression remained calm. "I do not expect you to believe, but I do expect you to make a choice." Ethan hesitated. The wind blew harder, making the night colder. He looked at the bottle again. What if she was telling the truth? What if this was his only chance? But at the same time, his mind screamed, this is insane. Who was she? How did she know about his illness? And what was in that bottle? "I don't trust you," he said finally. Dr. Vale nodded, as if she expected that. "Then don't trust me. Trust yourself. You have nothing left to lose." Ethan swallowed hard. He did have nothing to lose. His body was shutting down anyway. If this was poison, at least it would be quick. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed the bottle and pulled off the small cork. A strange, sweet scent filled the air, something between vanilla and fresh rain. Ethan hesitated one last time. Then, in one swift motion, he drank the liquid. It was cold at first, then warm, spreading through his chest like fire. The taste was impossible to describe. Sweet, bitter, metallic, and yet somehow perfect. And then it began. The change. Ethan's heart raced. His vision blurred, and a powerful heat spread through his veins. His whole body trembled. For a moment, he thought he was dying. Then, suddenly, the pain vanished. His chest, which had always felt tight and weak, now felt stronger. His hands, once frail, no longer shook. He clenched his fingers, feeling energy he hadn't felt in years. He gasped. The weakness in his muscles was gone. What did you do to me?" Ethan whispered, his voice full of shock. Dr. Vale simply watched him, her glowing eyes calm. "Your body is healing." Ethan's mind struggled to understand. Healing. This fast, it wasn't possible. But when he touched his skin, it felt different, as if his cells were alive in a new way. His vision sharpened. The sounds around him became clearer. He could hear the distant chirping of birds, the soft rustling of leaves. Even the cold wind no longer felt cold. His hands clenched into fists. This is real," he whispered. "Yes," Dr. Vale said, "but this is only the beginning." Ethan's stomach turned. There was something in her voice, something that hinted at a truth he did not yet understand. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What was in that drink?" Dr. Vale stood up. The streetlight behind her cast a long shadow. "You will find out soon enough," she said. But for now, rest. Your body is changing. You must be ready for what comes next." Ethan wanted to ask more, but suddenly his head grew heavy, and a strange darkness pulled at his mind. His last thought before everything faded was, "What have I just done? The impossible cure." Ethan woke up gasping for air. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The world around him felt different. Too sharp, too bright, too alive. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, loud and steady. The cold night air no longer bit at his skin. In fact, he didn't feel cold at all. He looked down at his hands. The wrinkles were gone. The rough patches of skin, the old scars from war, all vanished. His fingers were smooth, firm, and when he clenched them into fists, he felt power. Real, raw power. Ethan's heart pounded. This is impossible. His whole body, once frail and weak, now felt alive in a way he couldn't explain. Had the drink really done this? Then, a voice broke through his thoughts. "You're awake." Ethan turned sharply. Dr. Vale stood in the shadows, watching him with those glowing, unreadable eyes. He staggered to his feet, but something was wrong. His movements were too fast, too effortless. He almost overbalanced. "What the hell did you do to me?" His voice came out stronger, deeper, like a man who had never been sick a day in his life. Dr. Vale tilted her head. "I told you. You were healed." Ethan clenched his fists. "This isn't healing. This is something else. I feel different, stronger, like..." He took a deep breath. Everything smelled different. The metal of the street lamp, the damp earth, even the faint scent of Dr. Vale's coat. "You're changing," she said. "Your body is adapting. The process has already begun." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Process? You never said anything about a process." Dr. Vale sighed. "Would you have drunk it if I had?" Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. She was right. He had been dying. He would have done anything for a second chance. But he hadn't expected this. His fingers brushed his chest, where his heart beat strong and steady. He felt invincible. Then, suddenly, pain. It started in his spine, a deep, burning heat, spreading through his body like molten metal. Ethan gasped, dropping to his knees. "Ag, what is happening to me?" Dr. Vale knelt beside him. "Your cells are evolving. Your body is not just healing, it's becoming something new." Ethan gritted his teeth. "New? New how?" She didn't answer. Because something worse was happening. Visions of another world. Ethan's vision blurred. Then, the world vanished. He was no longer on Earth. He stood in a place that shouldn't exist. A sky that burned with 3 suns, rivers that flowed with silver light, and creatures that looked both human and alien. He saw tall, golden towers stretching toward a sky filled with floating ships. He saw beings like Dr. Vale, their skin shimmering under the light, their eyes filled with knowledge and power. Then, war. Explosions. Screams. A planet falling into darkness. He saw something chasing him. No, not him, but someone who had once lived inside his mind. A name echoed in his skull. A name he had never heard before. The last remnant. Then, blackness. Back to reality. Ethan's eyes snapped open. He was back on the street, his body drenched in sweat. Dr. Vale was watching him carefully. "You saw it, didn't you?" Ethan's breath came fast and hard. His hands trembled, not with weakness, but with power. "What was that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Vale didn't answer immediately. She stood up, adjusting her coat. "That," she finally said, "was your past calling to you." Ethan staggered back. "My past? I've never seen that place before." Dr. Vale turned to face him fully. "No," she said, "but your body remembers." Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't understand. But one thing was clear. He wasn't just healed. He was becoming something else. and he had no idea if he wanted it. Powers unleashed. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs like a war drum. His body felt supercharged, every nerve humming with energy. He took a step forward, and the world lurched. The pavement beneath him cracked. He stumbled back, gasping. Did I just do that? His breath came in short, panicked bursts. Everything felt wrong, or maybe too right. His muscles burned, but not from pain. They were waiting, expecting. Dr. Vale stood a few feet away, calm as ever, watching him like a scientist observing an experiment. "Your body is adjusting," she said. Ethan clenched his fists. He could feel the power coiling inside him, waiting to be used. But for what? The first test. Ethan turned to Dr. Vale, his hands shaking. "What is happening to me?" Her expression remained unreadable. "You are experiencing the first stage of evolution." "Evolution?" His voice was sharp. "You mean I'm turning into what? One of you?" Dr. Vale tilted her head. "Not one of us. Something else." Ethan didn't like the sound of that. He took a step back, trying to focus, trying to breathe. But with every inhale, he felt stronger, sharper, faster. Then, without warning, the world slowed. He saw the exact moment a falling leaf drifted toward the ground. He could count the veins in it. He could hear the faintest sounds, the ticking of a distant streetlight, the hum of the city miles away. Ethan sucked in a breath. What the hell? His mind screamed. This isn't normal. This isn't human. But deep inside, something whispered, this is what you were meant to be. Dr. Vale took a slow step forward. You need to learn control. Otherwise. Ethan never got to hear the rest of that sentence. Because at that moment, his world exploded. The power awakens. A sudden shockwave of energy burst out from his body. The street lamp behind him shattered into pieces. The ground beneath his feet cracked apart like an earthquake had struck. The air hummed with electricity, charged with something not of this world. Dr. Vale didn't move. She just watched. Ethan stared at his hands, his chest heaving. What? What did I just do? Dr. Vale's voice was calm, but there was something else beneath it, something close to fear. You released a fraction of your potential. Ethan swallowed hard. His skin glowed faintly, his veins pulsing with light. He felt more alive than ever, but at the same time, it terrified him. Memories that aren't his. Then, the visions came again. Not like before. This time, they rushed into his mind like a storm. Flashes of a battlefield not on Earth. Creatures with golden eyes and burning swords. A voice, his own, yet not his own, giving orders in a language he shouldn't understand. Then, fire, screams, betrayal. The last thing he saw was his own reflection. But it wasn't him. It was someone else wearing his face. And then, silence. Back to reality. Ethan snapped back to the present, gasping. He dropped to his knees, gripping his head. Enough, he growled. Enough of these hallucinations. Dr. Vale knelt beside him. They are not hallucinations. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes burning with something not human. Then what are they? Dr. Vale met his gaze. Memories. Ethan felt ice settle in his stomach. Whose memories? Before he could ask, Dr. Vale stood. You need to move. We don't have much time. Ethan frowned. Time for what? She turned toward the dark alleyway behind them. They know what you are now. Then, from the shadows, a pair of red eyes flickered to life. And Ethan knew, whoever they were already here. The hidden truth. The moment Ethan locked eyes with the red glow in the shadows, his body reacted before his mind could catch up. His pulse spiked, his muscles coiled, and a deep primal instinct inside him screamed. Danger. Attack. Survive. But something held him back. A whisper. Not from outside. From within. Not yet. Ethan froze. His breath hitched. Dr. Vale, still unnervingly calm, took a slow step forward. "You need to listen to me," she murmured. "Do not fight. Not yet." The red eyes blinked. And then a figure emerged from the darkness. It was tall, cloaked in shifting black armor, its limbs unnaturally long, its presence making the air feel thick and heavy. Ethan felt it before it spoke. A pressure in his skull, a force pushing into his mind. And then a voice, sharp and jagged, slithered into his head. "You are awake, remnant." Ethan staggered back. "What? What did you just call me?" The creature tilted its head, its red eyes narrowing. "You do not remember. Good. That makes this easier." Then it moved, faster than anything Ethan had ever seen. A blur, a shadow, a weapon. Before he could react, before he could even think, it was upon him. Instinct takes over. Time slowed. Ethan didn't decide to move. His body moved on its own. One step back, a twist of his torso. His hand snapped up, catching the creature's wrist in midair. Cracky. The force of the impact sent a shockwave through the alley. The creature hissed, its red eyes widening in surprise. Ethan shouldn't have been able to do that. And yet, he had. His fingers tightened around its wrist. He felt the armor shift beneath his grip. Something living, something unnatural. A new feeling surged inside him. Not fear, not panic, but power. Ethan gritted his teeth. "I don't know who the hell you are, but..." Then he made a mistake. He looked into its eyes. The flood of truth. It was like falling into an ocean with no surface. His mind was ripped open, his thoughts invaded, and suddenly he was somewhere else. A different planet. A different war. Thousands of creatures just like this one, marching through burning cities. Screams of the innocent. Towers collapsing. And in the middle of it all, him. Not as Ethan Carter, but as someone else. A warrior, a leader, the last remnant. A single voice echoed in his mind, clear as day. "If you fall, we all fall." Then, just as fast as it came, the vision was gone. Ethan gasped, stumbling back. His knees hit the ground, his hands clutching his skull. No, no, that wasn't real. That wasn't him. But it was. Somehow it was. The unwelcome answer. The creature's voice sliced through his confusion. "Now you see." Ethan looked up, his breath ragged. "See what?" It stared at him, its expression unreadable. "What you are, what you were, and what you will become." Ethan's fists clenched. "I'm not your damn remnant. I'm just a guy who got sick, who drank something I shouldn't have." Dr. Vale's voice cut through his anger. "No, Ethan." She stepped forward, her eyes glowing brighter. "You were never just a man. You were always something more. The drink didn't change you. It just woke you up." Ethan shook his head. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But deep inside, a part of him knew. It already had. The turning point. The creature didn't attack again. It simply stepped back, watching, waiting. And then, with a low, inhuman growl, it vanished into the shadows. Dr. Vale sighed. "It won't be the last." Ethan turned to her, his voice a growl. "I want answers. Now." She met his gaze, no longer hiding anything. "Then come with me." Ethan exhaled, trying to slow his heartbeat. He looked down at his hands, hands that no longer felt like his own. Something was changing inside him. And whether he liked it or not, there was no going back. Hunted. Ethan never believed in fate. He believed in war, in survival, in the cold, hard facts of life. But now, as he sat inside Dr. Vale's hidden bunker, deep underground, lit only by dim neon lights, everything he thought he knew was crumbling. A screen flickered in front of him, showing strange symbols and alien text he didn't recognize, yet somehow understood. Every cell in his body screamed that he shouldn't know this language. And yet, he did. He turned to Dr. Vale, his voice sharp. "What the hell did you mean when you said I was always something more?" She didn't hesitate. "You were not born, Ethan Carter. You were created." The truth Ethan never wanted. His heartbeat slowed. The words hit harder than any bullet ever had. "Created?" Ethan let out a dry laugh, but it tasted like rust in his mouth. "You're telling me I'm— what? A science experiment? Some kind of engineered soldier?" Dr. Vale's expression was unreadable. "Not engineered. Reborn." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "That doesn't make sense." She exhaled. "It will." She reached for a small silver device and placed it on the table. It flickered to life, projecting a hologram. What Ethan saw made his blood freeze. It was him, or someone who looked like him, standing in a battlefield of fire and wreckage, leading an army of beings with glowing eyes and armor made of living metal. The sky was dark with warships. The ground was cracked with energy, and his own voice echoed through the recording. "If I die, do not let them wake me again." Then, static. Ethan pushed back from the table, breath ragged. "No, no, that's not me. That's not possible." Dr. Vale's gaze didn't waver. "Your body died a long time ago, Ethan. But your DNA, your essence, it was preserved. Until the right time." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, panic creeping in. His whole life. Had it been a lie? And if so, who was he before? But before he could ask, alarms blared. A sharp electric howl echoed through the bunker. Dr. Vale's expression darkened. "They found us. The assassin arrives." Ethan felt the change before he heard it. The air thickened, pulsing with something dark, something hungry. Then, boom. The steel doors of the bunker ripped open, torn apart like paper. A shadow stepped through the smoke, moving with an unnatural grace. The assassin was unlike the creature from before. This one was human-shaped but too perfect. Its limbs sleek, its body wrapped in a suit of shifting black material. Its eyes were silver, glowing faintly. It spoke in a voice that made Ethan's skin crawl. "The remnant is awake." Then, it moved. A fight unlike any other. Ethan barely had time to react. The assassin was on him in seconds, striking with inhuman speed. But something inside Ethan activated. His instincts, his training, his past self buried in his bones. He ducked, spun, countered. Fist met fist. Energy crackled in the air. The assassin was fast, but Ethan was faster. He landed a devastating blow to its chest, sending it flying into the steel walls. The impact shook the entire bunker. Dr. Vale's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to leave now." But Ethan wasn't done yet. For the first time, he felt it, the urge to fight, to win, to destroy. And deep down, it felt familiar. Like this was who he had always been. The assassin rose again, its silver eyes narrowing. "You are incomplete," it hissed. "You do not remember what you are. But you will." Ethan stepped forward, his breath steady, his pulse a slow, controlled drumbeat. He didn't know what he was, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going down without a fight. The last choice. The bunker shook as Ethan's heartbeat pounded in his ears. The assassin, still standing despite the devastating blow, grinned, but there was nothing human in that expression. It tilted its head. "You are waking up, but you are not ready." Ethan wiped blood from his lip, his knuckles still glowing faintly from the impact. His body felt wired, charged with something old, something ancient. Dr. Vale moved beside him, gripping his arm. "Ethan, listen to me. We can't fight this thing. Not yet. We have to go." But Ethan didn't want to run. For the first time in his life, in this life, he wanted to stand and fight. Something inside him was done being hunted. And then, a voice echoed in his head. Not Dr. Vale. Not the assassin. His own. "If you fall, We all fall. The words rattled through him like an earthquake. Ethan took a shaky breath. What does it mean? The assassin lunged. And Ethan made his choice. A power unlocked. The moment the assassin struck, something inside Ethan snapped. Not in a way that meant breaking. In a way that meant awakening. The world around him slowed to a crawl. The air hummed. The dust floating in the bunker froze in midair. He could hear the pulse of energy in his own veins. And then, as if his body had been waiting for permission, he moved. Faster than thought. Faster than the assassin. One moment, he was standing still. The next, he was behind the assassin, his fingers locked around its throat. A sharp, inhuman sound escaped the creature's lips. For the first time, it looked afraid. Ethan's voice was steady, controlled. What am I? The assassin clawed at his grip, gasping. You air, it choked. But before it could finish, its body convulsed. Then, it disintegrated into black dust. Ethan let go, stepping back as the ashes swirled in the air and vanished. It was gone. But the words it almost spoke lingered in the silence. The answer lies ahead. Dr. Vale exhaled sharply. Ethan, that wasn't supposed to be possible. He turned to her, eyes still glowing faintly. What do you mean? She hesitated, then spoke carefully. You weren't supposed to unlock your abilities this fast. Ethan took a step closer. Then tell me, what am I? Dr. Vale didn't answer immediately. Instead, she lifted her wrist, revealing a small device with a glowing blue symbol. I can't explain it all here, she said, but I can take you to someone who can. Ethan clenched his fists. Who? Her voice was quiet. The last surviving member of your original team. His stomach twisted. Team. He had a team. Before he could ask more, she activated the device. A portal split open in the air, shimmering, electric, swirling with colors Ethan had never seen before. Dr. Vale turned to him. Step through, Ethan. Ethan looked back at the ruined bunker. His old life was gone. His new life was waiting. With one final breath, he stepped into the unknown. And everything changed. Ascension and battle. Ethan stepped through the portal, and into a war he didn't remember starting. The moment his feet touched the ground, his body jerked forward, instincts screaming move. Now, a plasma bolt sizzled past his head, melting the stone behind him. The air smelled like burnt metal and ozone. He was standing on a ruined battlefield, under a sky that churned like a living storm. And in front of him, an army. Hundreds of creatures stood in formation, clad in black, their silver eyes gleaming in the darkness. The same silver-eyed assassins that had been hunting him. At their center, a towering figure in jagged obsidian armor stepped forward. The moment Ethan saw him, his chest tightened. He didn't know his name. But his soul recognized him. The enemy who knew his name. The armored figure spoke, his voice sharp as a blade. You have returned, Remnant. Ethan clenched his fists. I don't even know who the hell I am. The figure laughed, low and cold. That is a lie. Then, the visions crashed over him like a tidal wave. Not glimpses, not broken memories. Everything. Ethan saw himself standing here before, not as Ethan Carter, but as someone else. The last general of the Lost War. The remnant of a fallen empire. The one who was supposed to be dead. And the man in front of him, his greatest enemy. A choice that cannot be undone. Ethan staggered, gripping his head. His breath came fast, his body trembling with the weight of the truth. He had fought this war before. He had lost this war before. And now, he had been brought back to finish it. Dr. Vale's voice snapped him out of it. Ethan, you are stronger than you were before, but you have to choose. Are you going to fight, or are you going to let history repeat itself? Ethan looked down at his hands. They glowed, pulsing with raw, untamed energy. The same power that had destroyed the assassin in the bunker. the same power that had once wiped out entire fleets. He knew what he could do now. The question was, should he? The enemy raised a hand. The army behind him moved forward in unison, marching like a single entity. Surrender, and we will return you to sleep. Fight, and this time, we will burn your new world too. Ethan stared at him, heart pounding. And then, he made his decision. A war that ends with him. Ethan lifted his hand. The air rippled. The ground shook. And then, he unleashed everything. A shockwave tore through the battlefield, sending the first wave of soldiers flying back like broken puppets. The storm above them split apart, light pouring through as energy crackled around him. He felt it now. Not just power. Control. He dashed forward, faster than thought, faster than sound, and in a blink, he was face to face with the enemy. The armored figure barely had time to react before Ethan drove a glowing fist into his chest, sending him crashing through a mountain of wreckage. The enemy gasped, looking up at him. "You have changed." Ethan exhaled, his eyes burning with light. "Yeah, I figured it out." The enemy snarled, rising again. "Then prove it." And the final battle began. The final fight. It was like fighting a ghost of himself. The enemy anticipated every move, countering Ethan's strikes with impossible speed. But Ethan was different now. He had spent too long running, too long questioning. Now, he embraced what he was. Blow after blow, shockwaves split the air. Buildings collapsed around them. The battlefield reduced to rubble. Then, an opening. Ethan saw it, felt it. In a flash, he was behind his enemy, his hands glowing with the full force of his power. He drove both palms into the enemy's back and let go. The explosion of energy lit up the sky, a column of light so bright it erased the darkness. When the dust settled, the enemy was gone. His army, without their leader, vanished into the void. Silence fell. The war was over. What comes next? Dr. Vale approached, watching him carefully. "You did it." Ethan turned to her, his body still thrumming with energy. "Yeah." She tilted her head. "And now?" Ethan looked at the sky, at the ruins of the battlefield, at the power in his hands. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of it. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I do know one thing." Dr. Vale raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Ethan exhaled, his eyes locked on the stars. "I'm not going back to sleep." And somewhere, in the vast expanse of the universe, something took notice.